It really is a pleasure to be here with you this morning. DEI is one of those hot button issues that people just get ridiculously crazy about. And I think one of the issues is that they don't get it. What they think is that it means that if somebody's getting this position or somebody's doing this, that means somebody else is shut out. And it really is the exact opposite. So I really think it's important that we have this conversation in all industries. And I think Linda said something. I didn't know that fragrance was an option. I mean, I don't think I have that skill set anyway, but I didn't know it was an option for me when I was growing up. It's something I never would have thought about. So I think having this conversation is really important, and it already sounds like you guys have gotten off to a great start, and I'm excited to just play a small part in helping you get the message out and have a deeper conversation. So I would like all of you to introduce yourself, give us your title, and what they say is give us some fun fact about yourself that you'd like the audience to know. Oh, that's going to be hard for you.
Start with Corey.
You want to start?
Okay, I will start, sure. Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for being here. I know it's early, and like Linda, I'm also not a morning person, but when Linda calls, we show up. I'm Corey Smith. I am the Vice President of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion for LVMH for North America. Have the unique pleasure of sitting in the largest luxury portfolio globally and leading this conversation around what inclusion looks like across our incredible portfolio of not just fragrances, but obviously fashion and wines and spirits and watches and jewelry. And I mean, LVMH owns everything. So we own a lot of things. And what this conversation looks like, I think, across not just our portfolio, but across the world, changes and looks differently based on where you are. I don't necessarily have a fun fact. I'm a native New Yorker, which in New York is actually rare these days that somebody's a native. So I'm just going to go with that and leave it alone because I'm not telling y'all my business. No.
That's okay, Corey. We're going to find out anywhere. Anybody got Google in here? All right. Adriana.
Yes, I'm Adriana Medina, Vice President Perfumer at Givaudan Fragrances. I'm originally from Bogota, Colombia. And one of the fun facts is that I'm a great salsa dancer.
Oh. I love it. See, Corey, I like her better than you already. But I know you're fun.
Yeah.
You just don't want to admit it this morning. All right, Mr. Möller.
So I'm Bernardo Möller, founder and creative director for House of Bow. I was born in Guadalajara, Mexico. And a fun fact about me is that before I worked in the fragrance industry, I worked in real estate for 16 years. And then I jumped into this industry in 2021. So very, very new to it.
But doing okay, I'd say. All right, Mr. Mann, we've all been waiting to hear from you. Your fun fact.
Hi, everyone. My name is Chris Collins, founder of World of Chris Collins Fragrances. One interesting fact is that there's 3 Scorpios on this stage. So that's why we're all super secretive. We don't want to.
That's a fact.
Yes. That's the key.
A fun fact is that I love music. Music inspires me in all my creations. Actually, Pascal, a good friend of mine, Perfumer, we connected perfume and music, and it's like an interesting connection between the two. So Prince is my favorite artist, and I use a lot of inspiration through music when I create fragrance.
Oh, little red Corvette, huh?
Little red Corvette?
Okay, I don't think you're going to fit in a little red Corvette.
That is impossible.
All right, so I'm going to get to the first serious question here. In the fall of 2021, the Fragrance Foundation launched a hashtag FragranceForwardTFF to amplify industry DEI, and your respective companies have all been wonderful partners and supporters of these efforts. Why is this kind of allyship and collaboration essential for the industry?
It's very essential. In 2021, I believe was the first conversation that me, President Linda, and Charnay had via phone call. I remember during that time when the racial unrest with George Floyd was going on, and I couldn't sleep. There was this thought swirling in my head, and I figured I needed to tell President Linda about this because at the time I was the only person of color or African American brand part of the Fragrance Foundation. Now we have many others. But I was saying to her that we need to amplify this. We need to make people know that, DEI also should be included in the world of fragrance. And she said, you know what, Chris, you're right. We're going to make it happen. And look at where we are 3 years later. It's unbelievable. There's more work to do. This panel is a testament to how far we've come. We have so many brands who are brands of color. We're more inclusive. And I think we should just serve as examples that things like this are possible in the fragrance industry. And I think we're doing that.
That's great. Bernardo, would you like to take?
Yeah, I think before I met Linda, and also in 2021, I knew about this, but it was something that I had heard about and agreed with, but I didn't really understand it. And I think only until you apply it, that we have a company and you apply it and you see how important it is and how impactful it is on people's lives, I think that's when you really realize how important these things are. So, yeah, that's definitely something that has evolved since I met.
Thank you.
Linda.
Yeah.
Adriana?
There's like a conscious responsibility after 2021 that I think a lot of organizations decided to take that seriously, especially my organization, to look at and scout a new talent from different cultures, different backgrounds, gender identity. I love that. And we discover like new perspectives, and we added a new talent that we never felt there was a gap until we really felt there was a consciousness. So we decided to take it very seriously. And I have to say, we are a reflection now of what New York City is, and in fact, a reflection of what the USA is. So we see it happening, and it's definitely such a proud moment to see the evolution and to see that we're taking action. We don't just walk the talk, we walk the talk.
Yeah. Corey?
Yeah, I mean, I think for LVMH, our strategy as it relates to DEI is multifaceted. On the one hand, it is about our workforce and our employees and our talent and making sure that we are trying to attract the best talent to our organization from all walks of life. And that we're looking for talent in all possible places. But then there's the other side of it that says that we recognize that our customers are also changing. Our clients are changing. The people that are walking into our stores aren't solely one thing, right? And even the idea of luxury, because we're in the luxury industry, luxury is such an arbitrary word. What does that mean? It means different things to different people. And when people use that word, it conjures up very different images. And so for us, the strategy was really to open our aperture, really start to talk to people, to invite them in. But you have to do that with a level of intentionality. I've been in DEI for 20 plus years, before 2020, before George Floyd, before all the allyship and advocacy of 2020 really started to happen. And the only way you can approach this and do it in a way that's going to make some progress, and Linda is a testament of that, is with intentionality, but also with authenticity. This panel wasn't put together, let's go find 2 Black people and 2 Spanish people, right? Like it was that, but that happens,
Yeah.
right? But this was intentional, and this is authentic, and everybody here has a true connection to the Fragrance Foundation. And so, that allyship and that advocacy, it has to come from here, but it has to come from here as well, right? We talk about leading with our hearts, but also leading with our hands and leading with our minds. And if you don't have that, we'll get to that. But you understand why in 3-4 short years, the narrative around DEI has changed because people went into it with the wrong intention.
Yeah, and the conversation is still going on. You're still having to convince a lot of people. All great responses. So we all know that fragrance is a quintessentially consumer-facing industry. What are your thoughts on how we can advocate for and achieve even more representation in the industry for all backgrounds? And Corey, I'm going to let you start us off if you don't.
Sure. I mean, I think it is about access points, options, opportunity. You said it. There's a few folks that have said they didn't even know that this was an option for them, right? Had they known, maybe they would have considered it. Maybe there would be more. And so what is the opportunity to have the option to enter this industry? And, you know, Charnay, we had a whole conversation about the students that are here, right? It has to start there. I am not doing what I got my undergraduate degree in college, right? But there are folks in the room that are very intentional and know this is what I want to do with my life. I mean, Chris's fun fact is that he was a professional supermodel for 20 years before he became, no lies told, Google it, right? Before he became, you know, he started his own brand, right? And so your life is going to change, but you have to have the network and the options to kind of grow into the things that you're supposed to be. So that representation, but that option and that access is so key.
Yeah, I'm definitely not using my degree either.
So, Adriana.
I feel education equals knowledge. And that's very, very important. Communication. Unfortunately, here it's not like when you're in France and it's part of your culture, you know? And we have to make sure we put it in our culture because, as you know, fragrance touches so many lives and so many people are not in tune with that sense. And I think, especially with the education, we have to reach out to schools, to organizations, to colleges. I'm excited to hear the opportunities for internships for the young students to kind of train and get the education they need to join our industry. So I think the most important for me is the education.
Okay. Bernardo?
For me, I would love to see more diversity in the storytelling, in fragrance storytelling. It's something that I feel like for very many years, at least in Mexico, it was not very much represented. And I would love to see from all types of backgrounds, not just, European. I think that really changes the perspective of people's mind about fragrance when they know that there's inspiration obviously from everywhere, and I know that's what inspired me, so that I would like to see that more of that.
And having a more diverse workforce, or you would get those various stories
Correct.
and which makes sense. All right, Mr.
So I don't know if it's just me, but I feel like recently there's been like a little fatigue around DEI.
Yeah.
And I wanted to get to a place where it's just normalized. Like the world is colorful. This panel is a testament to the colorfulness of fragrance. Bernardo and I were founders of our own brands, and we both know how challenging it is being men of color and, not like the traditional business owners, how they normally look. And the one thing that the conversation that I have with retail partners is I don't need a charity. I just need a chance. Because if you ever tried my fragrances or Bernardo's fragrances, which is one of my favorite brands in fragrance, we have good fragrance. We can compete with anyone in the store. And I truly believe that. So we don't need a charity. You don't need to give us something, well, the fragrances are okay, but we'll give you a chance because of it. We just need the opportunity because we have great brands, great stories. And I just wanted to take a minute to kind of praise the House of Beau, which is one of my favorite brands, honestly. So I just think we are the example of being able to be diverse, equitable, and inclusive, but also having a great brand. I mean, that's the bottom line.
And I would think you sort of have to keep having conversations like this and have companies like yours, especially one the size and the scope of an LVMH, talking about why this is a benefit for you and the consumer.
Right.
And maybe we eventually get, because that's the effort, to eventually get to that point where
Where it's not even a
you don't
conversation.
even have to have the conversation because that's how we live.
And not only is it like a benefit morally, I mean, it's a great business decision. I mean, like, make up most of the consumer base is made up of people of color. So it's a to me, it's a senseless idea not to actually embrace it.
Sort of long overdue. Can I ask you each, what are some of the challenges that you've all faced and had to overcome in your respective sectors of the industry? Adriana, let's start with you.
Start with the lady. Well, when I started in the industry, it was right after college. It was my first job in the lab because I wanted to work in the lab. So it was in a fragrance lab, working with a perfumer and kind of blending ingredients, following the recipe, and I fell in love. Later on, I joined the analytical team and I did fragrance analysis for 6 years in the hopes to become a perfumer. So, and it's only a few candidates that make it to the school. But I have to say, after 6 years working hard, proving myself, not giving up, working on my master's while I was working, because I always said, education is very important. Givaudan took a chance on me to the year 2000 to train as a perfumer. And I'm one of the few Latino perfumers in the US. There's more all over the world. But for me, being a woman and being Latina, and to be in the perfumery world, becoming a perfumer it's not an easy job. Between my peers, because we all compete, but we work together, and then also competing with the other houses and dealing with clients. It's been a 30-year journey that I'm happy to celebrate. And I always say, just love your job, do it with passion, work hard. Eventually, it will pay off. I think right now is the chance to kind of break the barriers and keep going. Don't give up. You guys starting your brands, I find it so courageous. You set an example to many that have a dream and want to execute it. So just wanted to put it out there.
Bernardo, you want to take the...
Yeah, I think more than challenges, I'm a true example of what somebody who's given the opportunity can do. I think that there were so many people that believed in me and in House of Bo from the very beginning, and of course it has a lot to do with this conversation. But they also saw somebody that was just very eager to show his passion for fragrance, right? And I think these somewhat of a success stories are really what inspires a lot more people to do the same thing. So more than challenges, I think I'm just really grateful for all the opportunities that I've had, and how well House of Bo has been received. Our storytelling is a little bit different. My inspiration is from Mexico, and that's something that from the beginning, everybody really appreciated it. Everybody appreciated that part of House of Bo, and they continue to appreciate it. So
Can I ask you?
Yeah.
Because you told us earlier that you made the transition after 16 years
Yes.
in the real estate industry, which I assume were 16 successful years because you weren't hanging around and not selling real estate. And then you made the transition to fragrance.
Yeah.
That's not necessarily easy.
No.
What inspired you to do that and gave you the guts to say,
Yeah,
I'm just
well,
gonna switch gears
actually,
totally.
it's a sad story because what inspired me was a painful moment in my life. In 2020, my dad passed away from COVID, and it really, changed my whole life upside down. I was doing real estate for 16 years but I was not passionate about it. I had this passion for fragrance since I was 13. I started collecting, and I knew a lot about fragrance that most people, just normal people, don't know. But it was just a passion. I think in the back of my mind, I had created this company. I knew like the names, the perfumes that I wanted to work with, the perfumers that I wanted to work with. They had like my idols from the industry, and that situation, I think, if you've had somebody pass away that's close to you, you're gonna agree, like it changes your perspective on how you want to live your life, right? Like sometimes it just puts everything into this
Focus.
yeah, where you're like, why am I even here?
Yeah.
When my dad passed away, those were the questions that I was asking, like, what is the purpose of my existence? And that diving into the answer for that question gave me that courage to do this passion. I think that another reason why a lot of people have received it really well is because there's true, authentic, purposeful, and intentional passion with everything that we do. Like our caps are made from real gemstones that are hand sculpted. Is something that I wouldn't have. Had I known how difficult it was, I would not have done it. But it just shows you how much thought goes into everything that we do. Not just me, everybody from our team, and that really, people really see that, I guess.
Thank you for sharing that. That is just a wonderful story. And the fact that this industry has opened its arms to you it really says that there is a space for everyone if they want to be there. Would you like to add to this, Chris? Anything that's challenged you,
Yeah.
from going from a supermodel to being a Corey started it.
Yeah, Corey started it. He's always
But
starting.
I'm not lying.
You know what? To touch on that, so for like 20 plus years, I was one of the faces of Ralph Lauren, which was an incredible education in luxury. To work for one of the most iconic brands in the U.S., not the U.S., but in the world, it taught me so many things about marketing, luxury, emotion, because I was part of the whole thing. So it was like an indirect education. And towards the tail end, fragrance was always my true love. And similar story, my dad used to wear all these iconic fragrances in the 70s, like English leather and gray flannel. And that's when I fell in love with it when I was a kid. And my dad passed away in 1996. I was still modeling, but it was like, okay, well, what's my purpose? Like, what am I doing? I wasn't happy towards the end. And I said, you know what? I'm looking around and I don't see anyone that looks like me in the fragrance industry. So how the hell am I going to do this? And then I had an incredible mentor, Killian, who was a great perfumer in the industry. He took me under his wing, and he didn't have to, and he taught me the business. And from there, I gained the courage to actually do it. But for the challenges, like really quickly, one of my favorite things to do is like talk to other founders, because there are some days where I'm like, what the hell am I doing? And there are other days where I'm like, okay, it's all making sense. It's coming together. So I talked to Bernardo, I talked to Giancarlo, Terry. I just had a conversation with Courtney from Lake and Sky. I don't know where she is, but she's in here. Because sometimes just to talk to other founders, to know that you're not the only one going through the ups and downs of entrepreneurship, it gives you a lot of energy to kind of know I'm on the right track. Because in your head, everyone else is doing fantastic, but you're the only one that's kind of like fighting through the weeds. But that's not the case. We're all fighting as entrepreneurs. So that's kind of like one of my favorite things to do is like talk to other entrepreneurs.
So, Corey, I'm going to ask you, you can answer this question about challenges or talk to us about, your thoughts on words of advice that you might give someone interested in a career in fragrance, in any capacity, be it an entrepreneur or maybe a perfumer or creative or a global DEI strategist.
Sure. I'll attempt to do both. I think the challenge is people don't actually know what the hell DEI is. Let's start there, right? And again, because the narrative has changed so quickly over a relatively short amount of time, people are probably even more confused. And as I was saying earlier, this conversation sounds very different depending on what part of the world you're in or from. So indulge me for a moment. Let's break it down. D, diversity. All that means is the things that make you who you are. So yes, it's your race, and yes, it's your gender, and yes, it's your sexual orientation, but it's also where you grew up, the schools you went to, how many languages you speak. It's all the things that make you who. It's not any one thing. There could be two white guys sitting right next to each other that are completely different, right? So it's not just your race. It's not just your skin. The E, the equity, is really, how do I level the playing field? How do I make society more equitable? How do I give somebody the tools and resources that they need to be successful? And those tools and resources are going to be very different from one person than it is for the person sitting right next to them who may look exactly like them. I define the E as, if you've got a brother and sister, somebody in your house was really good at math and the other one was not. It's kind of the case, always, right? The E is a math tutor. Not everybody needs the math tutor because one of you is already really good at math. The other one needs the equity. They need that pouring into them so that they can become good at math so that you can both be successful. That's equity. And then the I is inclusion. How do I take those other two things, all the difference in the room, all your backgrounds, all your experience, put them all in the same thing to make that thing better? So when you talk about fragrances, it is the difference between the three of them that has nothing to do with their skin color or their gender or their sexual preferences, right? But it is about, they all have this very unique background. They all have this incredible storytelling that we just heard from, right? How do we make that work to better the industry as a whole? They all have great products, right? But if no one has access to them, if nobody ever heard of House of Beau or World of Chris Collins. So for us at LVMH, one of the things that's really awesome is, like, Chris is sold in Sephora, which is one of our brands, right? It started out as an online, Chris, tell me if I'm telling too much, started out as an online venture, right? The only place you could get his stuff was online. It wasn't actually physically in the stores. But you're in stores, right? So that growth and that progress, for us, for him, it's a business model. This guy's like, I need to make some money. Because there's days I wake up and I'm like going crazy, right? And he and I have had those conversations, right? The creative side of any industry has to also balance with the business side. Chris and I have talked about, dude, it's time to get a CFO. Or, right? Because he's creative. He's going to sit in the lab. He's going to cook this stuff up. He's going to put it on it, and it's going to fly off the shelves. But then you have to have the business acumen to make sure that you're profitable, right? So the advice is fuel your passion, drive what you need to drive, understand that DEI is not a negative thing because you have people in this room that are willing to support you, not because you're black and tall and a supermodel, but because you have an incredible product that the world deserves to see and feel and hear and smell, right? But then you've also got all this equity in this room because these people want to see you win.
Could you just, yes,
I think the panel
drop
is.
the mic?
Thanks for coming.
Yeah, can I?
Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
No, that was excellent. It was just a perfect explanation. And so I'm going to ask you, Professor, you know, since you do work for such a global brand, what is the fear on the part of so many people of DEI?
Girl, this thing is being recorded. You're
as
not really
you-
going to give me...
Oh, I know. You know how to make it go
I got
down
you, I
well
got
for
you.
everybody. I know you do. That's why you've been successful. But what's the fear when it is so obvious that it would end up benefiting everybody?
These cameras are rolling. You really got me picking my words. Look, I think when we talk about inclusion, people live in a bubble. Most people live in a bubble, right? You are surrounded by things that are just very familiar to you. There is a fear of difference. There is a fear of, I'm not familiar with you, and therefore I'm not really sure if we're aligned. People view difference as less than. Because you're different than me, you're less than me. When what DEI is technically designed to do is to bring value to everyone. The inclusion is the value, right? So again, yes, people have this mantra about DEI that it's the right thing to do. We're doing it for moral reasons because we should all be equal and we should all hold hands and sing Kumbaya. Like, we can do that if y'all want, but it's money. This drives business, right? It's diversity breeds innovation, because if we all have familiar and similar thinking, if we're all aligned, we're going to get to an idea pretty quickly. Somebody's going to come up with an idea because everybody else thinks like them. They have the same background. They went to the same schools. They did all the things. Somebody's going to come up with an idea. The other person, everybody else is going to be like, yes, the meeting's over in 10 minutes. This is the idea. Everybody else says, yes, let's go golfing, right? When you have diversity of thought, somebody comes up with an idea, somebody else who's a little different from them says, you know what? Yeah, that's a great idea, but let's add to it. And then somebody else says, you know what? That's a great idea, but, and out of that diversity of thought actually comes something better. So diversity breeds innovation. Innovation breeds productivity, because guess what? Now that we're all invested in it because we all put our idea in, now we want to see it through. Diversity breeds innovation. Innovation breeds productivity. Productivity breeds profitability. But if you don't understand that,
Yeah.
if you just think, oh, you're different from me and I don't like your thought process because it's different than mine, you're never going to get to the rest of it. That's the challenge. It's the idea of difference makes people uncomfortable when what they should actually be doing is embracing the hell out of it.
Yeah, and I think that is a particular American issue. I know it's all over the world, but I think we got it worse than a lot of places, even though we think we don't. We just are just, yes, you put your mouth.
I'm going to stop. I'm going to stop.
Okay. All right. He's great, right?
Yeah.
I'm kind of sorry I picked on him at the beginning. Just kidding. I have a bad habit. If I like you, I pick on you. My mom did that. So my next question is, how can the fragrance industry continue to advance and accelerate diversity, equity, inclusion, and be even more accountable? I know that's a heavy.
Yeah, because there's not one answer. There's so many people in this room who are added value into making that possible, and then there's levels below and above them who you need to kind of get to have them understand that it's not just good morally, that it's a great business decision. It's funny because we were sitting over there having breakfast. I said, Corey, we're going to answer all the creative questions. You answer all the smart questions.
Okay.
Because he so brilliantly put it all together.
Yeah, he did.
It's like, let me break it down for you. And all, like I said before, all like brands like me, like my branding, House of Beau, is that given the opportunity, we're going to show you that we have really good product and great storytelling, and we're founder-led and we're passionate. And it's only a matter of time before the whole world knows it. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. I'm too looking forward, just building the brand to notice. But all the work that we're doing, all the work that everyone on this panel doing, and including Corey, who on the executive level, that's the highest of the highest, is helping this, initiative, this movement. So at least we're headed in the right direction. We got a long way to go, but going in the right direction is positive.
Yeah, I feel like, and I know I'm not a panelist, but objective observer. When Linda was talking earlier about all of the young people that are, in school and the courses that are being offered and the interns and that new blood, but in having all these people come in that look different, sound different, think different, to me, that sounds like a part that you're doing to move this forward, initiative forward, to make it, make the industry more accessible. And as I said earlier, to put it even on to make it as students' attention, because I don't think a lot of them go thinking, man, I could make a career out of that. I mean, maybe they do now. I'm pretty old, so but I think it sounds like to me that you guys are doing exactly what you need to do to move this thing forward.
Even sometimes without
bring
even
in new
saying
blood.
anything, just from them seeing it. I get DMs and messages all the time from men, young little black boys and girls who are like, I had no idea that fragrance is even a thing.
Yeah.
And I'm saying, like, you don't have to be a brand founder. You don't have to do what I'm doing. You could be a perfumer.
Yeah.
You could be marketing. You can work in so many different areas of fragrance. So it's vast. So just being the example is important.
Yeah. I feel there's a risk, after following what Corey said, there's a risk that no one or some don't want to take. And there's a chance, that you have to take on people. And I find it easy, at organizations to kind of look at your workforce and look at the landscape and see what you're missing and just filling those gaps that you see. Because it's easy, just take a chance on somebody that really has done the education, that has done the networking, which I feel is very important for anyone that is curious about the industry, is just network, join an organization and talk to people. I'm like Chris, I get DMs of a lot of people that tell me, you're my inspiration, you're a role model. How did you do it? Do I have to go to France? Do I have to sign up for ISIPCA? Like, what do I need to do? So the information is there. We just have to support it and take action. And like I said again, walk the talk.
Yeah. Okay. Don't just talk to walk. Okay. So, and we're going to take some questions from the audience. But I've got one last question for the panelist. We are here to celebrate 4 years of success with hashtag Fragrance Forward TFF, and we will not stop. To quote TFF President Linda Levy. Is it Levy? Am I saying it? Is it really Levy, or are you just saying that because you got tired of correcting people? Okay. What can we do as a community to continue to support and amplify hashtag Fragrance Forward TFF now and beyond? That's kind of the theme of today. Bernardo?
Yeah. I mean, I would say, now more than ever with such a volatile environment and such a fast-paced, things are so fast-paced right now. Just reminders, keep doing these kind of things, right? Like these, and hearing somebody like Corey explain it and verbalize it in such a
Clear,
perfect
concise.
way, right? Just keep doing these kind of things as little subtle reminders for people, because people do forget things today and age. No, I mean, things are so quick and fast paced.
Yeah.
And especially right now where everything's so volatile. But yeah, I would say just continue doing what you're doing and affecting the right people, even if it's just a few or one. If you affect the right person, obviously they pay it forward, and that creates a ripple effect. So, yeah.
Yeah. I love how the Fragrance Foundation has moved forward with the Fragrance Forward TFF, supporting small businesses, the guidance, the support that has been done is incredible. And it's actually an investment. I think there's a movement now with the small brands. I think the consumers are finding them unique. I think they're seeing the big brands, been there, done that, don't want to do that. I think the consumer is very curious on what the small are doing, someone new someone that decided to follow a dream and execute it and is bringing this excitement in the market. So it's the investment on the small, because you just never know. They could become big. They can be the future. So I love that about the Fragrance Foundation, what it's doing now and how we can help one another. Look at two brands out here supporting and admiring each other, done in very different ways. So that's my take on that.
Back in 2018 when I launched, I used to go to Bernardo Goodman myself because I couldn't afford to hire anyone to go in and sell the fragrance for me. So I used to go to my own area and sell. And one day I saw this little lady coming over to my little area. She's so little and cute. And it was President Linda. I was like, oh shit. And she introduced herself, and we met and we talked, and she has been relentless since day one of pushing Fragrance for TFF forward. Even though we put it together formally in 21, she was always an advocate for all of our brands. Since day one, since I saw her coming over to she's been at every event. Name an event anywhere you don't see President Linda. She is one of the hardest working persons in fragrance. And as long as we have an ally like Linda on our side, I think the future is so bright. And I can say thank you from my end, but I'm sure everyone in this room will say it, and everyone on this panel feels it. So thank you.
Corey, I feel like we can't leave without having.
That's why I wanted to go, because I wanted Corey to sign us off.
Look, the level of advocacy and intentionality is required, but I think for me, what I'm always looking for is, if you already feel you're an advocate or you already feel you're involved in this, bring a friend, right? So often, especially around this conversation of DEI, I'm in rooms where everybody's already on board. I'm preaching to the choir. You all get it. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here. We need to reach the people that are still kind of on the fence or not even in the room, right? So for me, it's always bring a friend, bring a peer, bring your boss, bring an executive, bring somebody that maybe doesn't quite get it yet, and have them introduce them to Linda. Invite Linda to come speak at your whatever, right? But it's the other folks that we need to reach. And again, I think to Chris's point, Linda's always in those rooms and she's always advocating and she's always doing it. She's the one that's converting the others, right? And so we all kind of have to have that responsibility and that willingness to do that. But yeah, it does require kind of stepping outside of your bubble, getting a little bit outside of your comfort zone. But if you really believe in this and you really believe in Bernardo and you really believe in Chris, I'm excited for when we're back here in another 4 years. We won't be back here because we will have all brought a friend, so we'll need a bigger space.
Okay. They're terrific, right? And I know some of you may have questions. Right behind you.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Kata. Thank you for being here. My question is for the two founders. I know that retailers often want to be inclusive, and so the first hurdle is kind of getting into retail. But then, how do you advocate for yourselves and your brands once you might be on the shelf? You don't have the same budget as some of the larger brands, and you're running into a little trouble with maybe the promise that doesn't quite come true. What are ways that you found to advocate for yourself for continued support? Thank you.
Yep, that's a great question.
That is an excellent question, because I always tell people the hard part is to get into the retailer. The hardest part is to stay within the retailer, right? So we ask for the chance, the opportunity, right? And I've seen your brand in so many incredible places. Then once you're in there, now they say most retailers we've done what we needed to do. Now you need to prove that you belong in this retailer. Before I go into a store, I want to understand what support am I getting and what support do you need from me in order to be successful? Because if we're going into it blindly, then It's like the blind leading the blind. And as you know, stores have no problem exiting your brand, making you buy back the product, and now you're in a negative from when you started before you went into the retailer. So I think an honest conversation needs to be had between you and the retailer before you go in the store. Because Sephora wanted me to come into their stores. At the time, there were no black fragrance founders ever. So I said, I'm going to be the first. What does that look like? And where do we go? Where do we see each other in 5 or 10 years? What do you see? What do I think is the objective? So I think those honest conversations need to be had, not just DEI brands, all small brands, because we can get eaten alive, no offense, by the LVMHs because they have the dollars to support the business. So you have to have a very honest conversation with the retail partner. What are our means to success together? Because this has to be a two-way street beneficially.
Yeah, I mean, we have this conversation all the time, right? It's a tricky question because they're always going to look out for the brands that are making more money for them, right? And ultimately, yes, they're giving you an opportunity, but I get it. It's a business for them. So, of course, we always try and have those conversations and make sure that they're giving us visibility. Sometimes I know that they give us certain perks because we don't have the budget like these bigger companies. But what do we do? I know that at our company, what we try and do is we really try and support the retailers by giving the brand exposure on social media, right? Just focusing on growing our brand. That's definitely something that we've seen has helped a lot with the retailers. The moment we started focusing on our DTC, on our brand, on putting it out there and giving it that awareness, more people started to come into the store. So sometimes I think the strategy is kind of not taking it in the store, but taking it out of the store to bring people in. Yep.
Anyone else with a question?
So my question to you is, what's been your one initiative that you've worked on that you're most proud of that has created change that you're proud of?
That's a great question. Thank you. There's been several. I mean, I think, and I'll talk just about LVMH for a second. But I've worked in sports for 10 years. I worked at Major League Baseball. I was in entertainment. I worked at NBC Universal. I was in entertainment, pre-Harvey Weinstein, pre the Me Too movement. So I saw in real time, like, the inequity that women were facing in Hollywood. Forget the horrible treatment. Like, the pay gap was huge between what men were making and what women were making. Same thing in sports. Sports has its challenges because it's a very male-driven industry, very testosterone-driven industry. And so there were a ton of inequities as it relates to women. There are two things that, I'm kind of really proud of. Macro DEI. One, for LVMH, we set some goals kind of right when I got there. LVMH was already had a goal to increase the number of women in executive positions. Our industry, LVMH in particular, is 65%, 70% women in our workforce. It's majority women. Yet there was a point in time at LVMH where it was 70% women, yet they only held 20% of the executive positions. And so, and this is, back in the early 2000s, they set a goal that said, well, we want to at least make that 50-50. If the majority of our workforce is women, why aren't any women at the top of the organization? And so they set out this goal of 50% in executive roles. Because again, the top is where it matters, right? I'm proud to say that in the US, we have actually achieved that 50%. We're actually 60% women in executive roles. Trisha's in the room. She's one of them, right? But that goal existed when I got there in 2020. And so I said, if you can do it across one dimension of diversity, You can do it across any others. And so we started to set these other goals. So I set a goal for BIPOC, people of color, in executive roles. And so we've increased the diversity in the organization. I have all the stats, I got the receipts, I know exactly how our percentages and how our numbers have moved successfully. But it's a double-edged sword because now I've made the organization more diverse. I've got more women, I've got more people of color, I've got more LGBTQ, I've got, you name it, I've got more of it. The problem is now I have people leaders, I have department heads that now don't know how to manage diverse teams. So on the one hand, I've increased the diversity, but now I've got more issues actually, because now I've got leaders that may not know how to talk to a Black woman, or may not know how to speak to somebody that's Latino, or is giving a different performance evaluation to somebody that's LGBTQ, right? So it's a great stat, it's a great comms look, it's all the things, right? But it hasn't quite solved everything. So all of our stats, all of our goals, all of our targets, all of the KPIs, all the things, they're going up, but we're still not done. The second piece is supplier diversity, and this is where entrepreneurs come in. So supplier diversity is this idea that a corporation has vendors and suppliers and stuff that they need to buy that they don't make themselves. Office furniture, whatever it is. Making sure that we buy some of that stuff from entrepreneurs that are diverse, women-owned companies, minority-owned companies, LGBTQ-owned companies, the same demos, right? I've seen entrepreneurs grow simply because they get work from a corporation that I've worked for. When I was at NBC Universal, I cut $1 million check to a Black guy who owned a business that we were doing business with, right? I've made millionaires, right? Like that, and that's money, right? So the inclusion stuff, the workforce stuff, yeah, we're hiring people, we're bringing people on board. But if I can help an entrepreneur grow its business simply because they want to do business with an LVMH, for example, and as an LVMH example, we have a packaging company. It's a Black-owned packaging company. He started out doing business with Fenty Beauty, Rihanna's company. But the reality is, in this industry, everything goes in a box. So what's to stop him from everything? Whether you're talking about a $50,000 Louis Vuitton bag or you're talking about a little thing of lipstick, it's in a box. Everybody knows the Tiffany blue box, right? It's in a box. Everything we sell goes in a box. So this is a great opportunity for that one business to really scale within LVMH. He's doing business with one of our brands. What's to stop him from doing business with all of them? So supplier diversity is an interesting concept because, again, we're talking about tangible dollars. I can track how much money we are spending with women-owned companies, with LGBTQ-owned companies. I can track the dollars. I can track the success the same way I can track internally what we're doing from a workforce perspective. And so, I've been at and by the way, the Fortune 100 all have a supplier diversity function. So this is a common thing in corporate America. I didn't make it up. It's been around for 50 years. This idea you can track the dollars is powerful. And so those are probably the two things that I think are really strong programs that can enhance or grow. And again, it can be anybody, right? But it takes a level of intentionality to get it done. So those are probably the two things. And again, I've been very successful at both of them across my entire career, not without a lot of hard work and some resistance, because again, not everybody gets this, but it's doable. Thank you.
Wow.
My name is Aubrey Moslin, from him, his pronouns. I have the privilege of leading communications engagement and strategic partnerships for L'Oreal North America for diversity, equity, and inclusion specifically. So I spend a lot of my time digging into the data, working with all 38 of our brands to help them to understand the true power, both morally and economically, in ensuring that everybody feels seen, considered in our industry. Some recent data came out from the Unstereotype Alliance that basically was titled Inclusion Equals Income, and it indicates that on average, when brands engage in inclusive marketing and inclusive product positioning, they can actually grow their short-term bottom line by about 3.5% and their long-term profit margins by about 16%. That being said, the numbers are unimpeachable. It's still quite difficult to get folks to understand that in order to truly reach these audiences, you've got to be authentic, you've got to be deliberate, and you've got to be really intentional. And quite often when engaging with retail partners or big media organizations, some of the refrain that you can hear at times is, well, we've run this campaign for X amount of time and we're just not seeing the return. And often what I say as a result of that is, this is the price of ignoring an untapped community for so long, right? You're not going to generate that trust tomorrow. You're not going to generate that conversion tomorrow. What are your thoughts on engaging in an industry in which we know, on average, Black, Latine, consumers of difference and consumers of color, they over-index in luxury consumption, particularly in fragrance consumption. How do you engage with your marketers who are saying, well, we've got to cut the marketing budget if it's not producing what we want it to produce within the first 3 to 4 months of the campaign?
Corey?
Oh, man. I mean, yeah, y'all get me in trouble today. Look, to your point, it takes time. And, you know, I say this often, and I've said it internally, and I do a variety of trainings with our workforce. There's a fine line between culture appreciation and culture appropriation. And you can't continue to borrow from respective cultures without inviting them in. And then how you speak to them has to be inviting, right? It can't be transactional, right? It can't be, now just come give me your money and leave, right? It has to be this idea of authenticity, and I know we keep using that word, and we've said it several times throughout this conversation, but it's like any relationship, right? It takes time. And so this idea that it's gonna happen like that, and I won't even use our true business. I'll use, because we were talking about students earlier, because in addition to DEI, I also oversee our academic relations. So how we speak to colleges and universities to try to attract talent to come work at LVMH. And I got that because initially when I joined, I was only talking to the HBCUs, historically Black colleges and universities, because that was a DEI strategy. And it was kind of like, well, why am I only talking to the HBCUs? Are y'all saying something different to the Ivies and saying something different to the PWIs? Like, the message should be the same to all the students regardless. It can't appear to be transactional, which is, again, what a marketing campaign is, right? It's transactional, but it requires a certain amount of time for the transaction, for people to trust you, for people to be actually bought in and convinced that you mean well for them, not just for yourself. But to your point, we've all got a business to run. And so everything has a deadline and a budget, and we're not going to exceed that either, right? So it is finding that fine line between where's the authenticity and how much time do we give this to actually penetrate the market? I treat DEI like an emerging market, right? Like if you were in a business and you wanted to enter a new country and figure out how long is it going to take for me to penetrate this new land that I've never been in before, it's the same thing with certain communities that you've never paid attention to before, even if they're here. It's an emerging market, right? And that requires effort and that requires time. And sometimes it might require boots on the ground, whatever that means, especially in social, right? But it's never going to be quick. It's never going to be easy. You're not going to be able to flip that country and then be like, okay, we got it. Stamp our flag. Let's go. You've got to invest. And so, I think when people start to process it as an emerging market, maybe, and really look at the budget in terms of here's how much time it's going to take to get this done, maybe there'll be a slightly different approach. Because you're right, I think there's a cut and run approach now, especially, and again, I go back to value, right? Where it's a community where you don't actually see the value. So now I'm not going to invest in it too much because I'm not actually sure what the return is going to be, right? But if you understand the figures that you laid out, and I've done this conversation, I've talked to our presidents. Trisha sat in the room and heard me say $1.7 trillion of Black consumer spending, 3 of Latinx, right? Like everybody's heard me say it. You've got to be willing to invest to get some of that money back.
Sandra, if I may, like I always say to people, me being a Black founder, Bernardo being Latinx, is that the proper way to say it? Sorry, Latino founder. Like I just don't sell to Black people, right? And I'm sure you just don't sell to Latin people.
That part.
I sell to
what I was
everyone. Everyone. I'm a proud Black founder, and you're a proud Latino founder, but I sell fragrance to everyone. And I think I've had conversations with VCs, PEs, every other 2-word letter acronym that you could think of. Why not come in and invest in no, you know, I'm gonna take my brand out of it, and a brand like House of Beau, and say, wow, this is an avenue to a communication to a customer that we have struggled to connect with. Instead of waiting for us to get to 15, 20 million in order to come in and invest, why don't you come in a little earlier? Because we have done something that most, especially in fragrance, that most of these companies have not been able to do, and that is to connect with Black and brown consumers. So come in a little earlier. Take a risk, take a chance, right?
Yeah, you know, I was thinking the same thing. I think sometimes subtleties go a really long way. I agree. Like, I don't just speak to Latinos or Mexicans with our storytelling, right? Like, ultimately, we understood from the very beginning that we're speaking to the American consumer, and it's the American consumer that's diverse in all ways, but there's a similarity in the sense that we're all here for the same reasons, I think, you know. So I guess the best way to explain it is it's very different for me to storytell my brand to somebody that lives in Mexico and has never lived in the US to somebody who's Latino and lives. So it's almost like these subtleties go a long way, because it doesn't necessarily have to be this directed exclusively to one category. No, I think it really has so much more impact when people see a little bit of something that gives them representation, and they're like, oh yes, and maybe that speaks to it being intentional, not feel like it's a transactional. No.
I mean, at the end of the day, this is business, right? Again, that's why I go back to, we're not doing this for morality and the right thing to do. Everybody wants to be successful. LVMH wants to be successful. Bernardo and Chris want to be successful. So this idea that you need to box people into these things is ridiculous. I think where the metrics come in is where you can show the value of the boxes, but I'm still trying to get to every box. I don't look at my role as, I don't consider myself a DEI executive. I consider myself a business executive. I just know how to tap into different markets. Yeah. And I think if everybody approached it through that perspective, and we have some incredible people in our organization that do, but if everybody approached it from that perspective, I'm just trying to tap into a variety of markets. I need to be culturally aware of what those markets are. I need to have some agility around understanding their experiences. So you have to be educated and aware on what's going on, but it's just business. It isn't, let's go only after white gay men. Yes, that's an awesome audience, and you have to know how to approach them in a way that's authentic to them. But no one would say that's the only category I'm going after when there's all this money sitting over here in some other category as well. So it's a bit foolish that that's how people want to approach it, or confine people or box them in, right? The same. I had a conversation with an art gallerist. Black woman, she owns an art gallery in Soho. People come to her gallery expecting to see Black art because she's a Black woman that owns an art gallery. First of all, what is Black art?
It's like a black job.
It's like a black job. It's like a black job, right? But that's the thing, because you can be a Black artist. That doesn't mean all of the art that I paint is going to be a bunch of Black people. Like, that makes no sense, right? And so this idea that we look at the world in these very confined boxes, it's so silly.
And that is what is doing us in.
Yeah.
I am so energized. I have loved listening to you. I love hearing about a business I don't know much about, a profession that I have respect for and I spend my money on, but you've really educated me this morning. And the conversation around DEI, I have been trying to figure out how to have it in a sensible way on the show that I work on. And just listening to you guys this morning, I love it. And I cannot wait to leave here and talk to my show producer about it, because I just think it's a wonderful conversation. And thank you for allowing me to be part of this conversation this morning. I have thoroughly enjoyed it, probably more than any of you guys in here. Seriously, it just really got me excited because you're all so invested in this. Yes. And I have appreciated you sharing your knowledge with me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.